Hey everyone, and welcome back to my Completionist playthrough of Diablo 2 on Hardcore. This episode is going to be a little different again, because before we get back to our progression in Act 2, we have a few tasks to accomplish first. I expected to do those things a little later in the run, but our plans got accelerated by the acquisition of the Monarch last episode, and with it already in our possession, it makes the most sense to get that spirit runeword created before resuming anything else. However, here we need to take a step back and explain a few things. The Monarch requires 156 strength to be equipped, which necessitates a respec. We need to reset our attributes and allocate them differently to satisfy that high strength requirement. And in order to precisely determine how many hard attribute points we need to put into strength, we first want to engage in a few mechanics that might influence our decisions, namely imbuing and crafting, with a bit of gambling as well. And depending on the results of those, we might need to reshuffle our gear and potentially gain or lose some strength compared to our current setup. So the first thing I'm going to do in preparation for those is some gem shrine farming. We'll need a lot of perfect gems for crafting, and I want to make use of a juicy spot we've discovered during our progress in Act 1 Hell. So before we switch difficulties for the purpose of using Charcy's Imbue services and Larzuk's Socket Quest reward, thus resetting the maps on Hell, I wanted to get some value out of farming the spot we have available here. And let me show you what I mean. Right by the waypoint of the stony field, we have 3 shrine spots. Shrine number 1, number 2, number 3. Super quick to check. Now, I haven't gotten into specifics of farming gem shrines before, so to provide a brief summary, gem shrines are one of the rarest ones to appear. They have about a 3% of a chance of spawning on a shrine spot. There's a whole process for the game to determine how shrines are created, and I'll provide some more detailed sources in the description if you're interested. Suffice to say, the spot we have here is really nice with those quick 3 chances, and it allows us to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because if we get some experience shrines along the way, I might use them to kill some special groups in the vicinity, getting some experience along the way as well. Oh, and of course, just to be thorough, there's also the option of transforming 3 flawless gems into a perfect one in the Horadric cube, but I would prefer to avoid that. It's time efficient of course, but wasteful in terms of resources. So, I'll be off to find some gem shrines now, and we'll be back with an update soon. Well then, my modus operandi was to create a new game and check the 3 shrines. If there was nothing interesting, I would reset. If there was a gem shrine, I would of course use it. And if there was an experience shrine, I would usually pick it up and kill a few special groups in the area. Sometimes go kill Recognition nearby. But eventually I couldn't help myself and started doing some trips to the ancient tunnels with those experience shrines rolling. Those runs gave us some nice experience and the occasional item of level 85 or higher. Later I started doing those runs on Players 3, which I think was worth it, even though the kill speed wasn't that great, and the danger for Emilio was significantly increased. He had a pretty tough time surviving down there. There was also one close call I had with Nisharan herself, but thankfully we avoided any disappointing incidents. By the time we had an amount of gems I was satisfied with, we were already level 81, so I decided to push it a little further to 83 so that we can do some optimal imbuing. I'll of course elaborate once we get into it. In the end, I've also done some Countess runs. Wasn't really counting them, but it wasn't for too long. I just wanted to get us a few more soul runes for crafting, either directly or by upgrading the lower runes into them. Anyway, with all said and done, we ended up getting 6 levels, we have quite a supply of gems and runes ready for crafting, and also got us to max gold for some gambling later. So, let us do a proper summary of the spoils we've gotten so far, and then proceed to the next phase of our plans. Alright, we've got some nice value out of farming that gem shrine spot, but I'm sick of it now. I had enough patience to get us 14 perfect amethysts and 16 perfect rubies, yes. So more than enough to use up all of our jewels, and also got a few notable things along the way, so let's take a look. All you see here, by the way, is the sum of our entire farming from all the places we've been to, wherever they happen to drop. I only separated the runes from the Countess on their own page, everything else is a general showcase. So of course we've got the perfect gems, even got a few topazes upgraded for the future maybe, and then the crafting stuff. Jewels, rings and amulets sorted by their item level, going from the bottom up. On the next page we have some less noteworthy runes, as well as these 4 more important ones. 2 souls for crafting, a hell and a gall, which is number 25, our highest yet by far, that dropped from the ancient tunnels. That's generally how you get the higher runes. You just play the game and every once in a while it will bless you with a better rune somewhere. We also have some high level charms for potential rerolls someday and flawless gems that dropped along the way. Next page are the socketables. We have this 4 open socket partisan. A bit of a shame something like that didn't drop for us back in Nightmare. We could have saved one Larzuk's socket quest reward that way, but it's not a big deal. This is an exceptional polearm, so it would have served us as a proper base for insight if we had gotten it before. And then we have these armors, another 2 open sockets and a 3 socket one. There's a lot of 3 rune chest armor runewords, but none that would be particularly useful or realistic in this run, except Lionheart maybe, but we still have yet to see a Lum rune, and of course having our skin of the Viper Magi, we're totally set for chest armors anyway. And then we have a 4 open socket armor, which we might stuff with those perfect topazes at some point for a big magic find boost, particularly when farming Hell Mephisto, for example, using the moat trick, if we ever even do that. Then we have some stuff for imbuing. I found another spiderweb sash and a mithril coil. Those are both elite belts, which I did consider for imbuing, but ultimately I think we'll stick to circlets. Speaking of which, we also have another circlet and a coronet for imbuing. At this point they are no different from each other, but I'll explain more when we get to it. And then we have some rares that aren't useful, and some stuff that will sell for 35k gold when we're not at max anymore. And now, this ring in the center is the most disappointing drop maybe from this entire playthrough. Just look at this. Exactly the properties we needed, but just horrible values, except that 16 strength. If the life and resist were better, this could have been perfect. I just can't even look at this ring anymore. Anyway, on this page we have a few uniques and sets that we haven't seen yet. We have Tooth Row and Lead Crow, as well as Lance of Yagai and Blast Bark. And then Alder's Helmet and Laying of Hands, which I think we haven't had yet. Alright, here's the Countess page. Those lower runes aren't sorted, as you can see. I'll do it at a later point in between recordings. I've just separated the more notable ones. We have an Amn and 4 more souls for crafting, and 2 slightly higher runes, another Hell, another Foul. And finally we have a page with potentially useful charms. Those ones give fire resist. Those values are of course far from perfect, but still, we might use them after some gear changes, especially having that Spirit Monarch in mind, which gives no fire res. And then we have this 5 strength large charm. It's the max roll and best ratio for space occupied when it comes to attributes on charms, but at the same time, it's only 1 level's worth of attributes, so an equivalent to just 10 life for the Sorceress, if you look at it that way. Shame it doesn't have a nice prefix to go along with that strength. And then we have 2 charms that we will use. This cold res charm will replace 2 small ones and give us a little more cold resistance for the same inventory space. And this life charm will give us 14 more life over this 18 life one. Now, before we move on, the last thing I'd like to do is give a bit of a background for how the stats on items are generated in Diablo 2. This will be relevant for all the following mechanics we want to engage in, and will help me explain my decisions better. We'll go decently in depth with it, so if you're not interested, there will be a timestamp to skip ahead to the conclusions, but I'll be referring back to this information later in the episode, so as always, feel free to stay a while and listen. The part of the item generation process we're interested in here are affixes and how they operate. Affixes are essentially building blocks for magic, rare, and crafted items. The stats and properties we see on those items are the result of affixes they rolled, each one giving the item a certain property with a value. This is different from uniques, sets, and runewords, which have predefined stats separate from affixes. Affixes are split into prefixes and suffixes. This distinction matters the most for magic items that can only have a maximum of 1 prefix and 1 suffix. Rare items, however, can have from 3 to 6 affixes in total, with a limit of no more than 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes on a given item. Rare jewels and crafted gear can spawn up to 4 affixes. And speaking of limitations, certain affixes can't occur together, primarily ones from the same group or family. For example, if a rare item receives the tiger suffix, granting it from 21 to 30 life, it cannot also roll, say, the mammoth, which would give it another 31 to 40 life. And speaking of value ranges, some affixes are reserved for magic items only. Continuing the same example with plus life, the squid and the whale are magic-only suffixes that can't show up on rare or crafted items. Those can only get up to 60 life from the Colossus affix. Finally, each affix in the game has a level and a list of items it can spawn on. More powerful properties and higher brackets of values generally have a higher level assigned to them. Sometimes that level can vary depending on the item type. Furthermore, each affix will impose a character level requirement, the value of which is usually around 75% of the affix's level, but there are exceptions where it is higher than that. Now, looking from the item's perspective, each item type has a list of potential affixes that can spawn on it, and when a particular item is created in the game, it receives an affix level, which determines the range of eligible affixes for it. Only the affixes with an equal or lower level will be able to have a chance of showing up on that item, while affixes with a higher level will be excluded. So the higher affix level an item has, the bigger the selection of potential affixes it has access to, including those higher level affixes granting better stats and higher values. The item's affix level is based on its item level and quality level, which is a fixed value for every base item. There's a few formulas that determine the specifics. You'll find links to some more detailed sources and to an affix level chart in the description. In our situation, we don't even have to delve too deep into this, because our imbuing, crafting, and gambling will be simple in that regard. Amulets and rings always have an affix level equal to their item level, so the case is clear there. And when it comes to circlets, they have a rather unique property named magic level, which increases their affix level compared to their item level or quality level, whichever is highest. So in effect, they will have a higher affix level than what it normally would be. Circlets have a magic level of 3, for coronets it's 8, and then tiaras and diadems are a bit of a different case altogether because of their high quality levels and magic levels. Diadems in particular can spawn all available affixes for circlets, regardless of their item level, which means that even a level 8 character can imbue them to their maximum potential. Anyway, now that we understand those affix-related fundamentals, we'll be able to put that theory into action. So let's circle back to our own situation. We'll tackle imbuing first and finally provide some explanations. The mechanic of imbuing, of course, changes a non-magical item we give to Charcy into a rare one. It's entirely dependent on the item type we give her and our character's level, which is going to determine the item level of the rare gear piece we receive back. It's going to be our character level plus 4. Therefore, in our case, being a level 83 character, the imbued circlet we get will have an item level of 87, and since circlets have a magic level boost of plus 3, its final affix level is going to be 90, and 90 is precisely the level we need to be able to spawn the plus 2 class skills affix on it. With an affix level of 90, our circlet can generate any affix available for it, so for once we can do something optimal. This also answers the question why coronets aren't any different in our case for imbuing. Their higher magic level doesn't matter, since at character level 83 we can already get access to all affixes even on a regular circlet. This shows, however, why coronets are higher value than circlets. They can get access to the best affixes earlier at a lower item level. It also matters even more when gambling, but we'll get to that later. So yeah, I suppose in the end we will resort to the tried and true methods, the traditional high-level circlet imbuing, but that's for a good reason. Circlets are able to spawn all kinds of great affixes, giving them unique properties that don't normally appear on helmets. Of course, the most desirable one is that plus 2 skills, but you can get other unique stuff, like faster run walk, for instance. Anyway, to list some of the best properties for us and their max values, high-level rare circlets can get up to plus 2 skills for a class or a particular skill tree, 2 open sockets, 20 all res, 40 in a particular resistance, 30 strength, which is massive, 60 life, 90 mana, 30% faster run walk, 20% FCR, and that's basically all the relevant ones for us. So, amazing potential there. But as with everything in Diablo 2, we have to get lucky, so let's not set our expectations too high. Many potential stats circlets can get are entirely useless for us, and even if we get the good ones, they might have low values. The most likely outcome of imbuing is, of course, selling the item back to Charcy, but as always, there is hope for something great when the stars align. And well, it doesn't even have to be that great to be an upgrade. I mean, lore is okay, but I certainly wouldn't mind something a little bit more juiced up. Alright, I put away some charms we were using into our stash, prepared the circlets, and now we're ready to go. We're starting on Hell here, and we'll go down in difficulties in the process. So, Charcy, what do you have for us today? Oh my god. Look at this beauty. Just 3 affixes, yet so nice. This circlet definitely tried to go the right way. One affix is of course plus 2 to druid skills, the other affix is plus 2 to all res, plus 20 to all res, and then the third affix is another 10 to fire res. Wow, what a shame this wasn't Sorceress skills. I would have replaced lore with that in a heartbeat. Alright, let's try out Nightmare then. And see if Charcy can keep up with the nice streak of giving useful affixes, useful stuff. Cold skills and 36 life. That's too bad. We're going to be predominantly relying on our fire skills. and I don't want to give up +1 to all skills just to have +2 to cold. Well, anyway, let's try out normal and see what that gives us. Charcy, come on. One last try. Let's go, baby. Oh, man. Wow, that was actually the selection of circlet imbues, all with some sort of skills, and +2, whether it's for a certain tree or class. Shame it wasn't anything that great for us, but well, that was to be expected. Of course, those imbues weren't as bad as I thought, especially this one. Ah, such a shame it wasn't +2 to Sorceress skills. Like, can you imagine that? That would be nice, or would have been nice. Well, anyway, on to the next thing.
I'm making a fortune right here.
Now, before we finally get into crafting, let's get ourselves a few more amulets. And for that, gambling will come in handy. Gambling is the endgame gold dump mechanic that allows us to buy unidentified items for a chance of getting something decent, or to get more magical items for various purposes. Every act has a gambling NPC, and fortunately we don't have to exit town to reset his gambling menu. Just closing it is enough to get a new selection. There's always an amulet and a ring on every such screen, and those two items, plus circlets and coronets, are usually the most gambled for item types. The purchased items are going to be magical the vast majority of the time, but there is around a 10% chance for the item to be rare, a 0.1% chance for it to be a set item, and a 0.05% chance for it to be unique, and those values are unaffected by Magic Find. Our gambling character's level matters in a few ways here. As we go up in levels, the gambling selection increases, we gradually unlock and increase the chance for the items to upgrade to exceptional or elite, and most importantly, it is again the basis used to determine the item level of whatever we gamble for here. It will be rolled from a range of -5 to +4 of our character's level, each value having the same 1 in 10 chance. So in our case, being level 83, we'll receive items of levels from 78 to 87. Also, speaking of circlets and coronets, here the latter shows its superiority in more ways. First off, with that magic level boost of +8, you can start safely gambling coronets 5 levels earlier if you want to always have them get the Affix level of 90, or whatever Affix level you're aiming for. Also, coronets can get upgraded to tiaras or diadems, while circlets have no chance of that and never upgrade. So technically, taking all of the mechanics here into consideration, you could obtain the unique diadem, Griffin's Eye, by gambling a coronet. On a level 99 character, having the best chance for a diadem upgrade, which is around 5% at that point, and considering the 1 in 2,000 chance to get a unique from gambling, you'll have a whopping 1 in 39,000 chance of getting Griffin's Eye through this system. Just thought you should know that. Well, anyway, let's buy ourselves a few amulets then. Spend some of those golden coins, those fat stacks. Alright, I gambled a full inventory of amulets, with a few rings in there as well. I spent like 2/3 of our gold in the process, and I sorted the 5 notable amulets we got here in the bottom right corner, so we will inspect them last. And here I'm just going to scroll through everything else we got. Nothing really special besides those 5 I separated. Just a variety of item levels to work with in crafting. And here, +3 to fire skills. This is actually something to consider. If we don't get anything better from crafting, and provided that we can sort our resistance situation and have a satisfactory amount of life, this amulet would represent a serious boost to our damage, so it's definitely something to hold on to. Shame it doesn't have a suffix. It could have had life or strength on it. Unfortunately, no resistances, because those come in the form of prefixes. Anyway, here another nice find. 19 all res, almost the max, with a 10 FCR to boot. Shame nothing like that dropped for us earlier in the run, but still a nice amulet to look at. Here, a little bit more significant resistances, but not much else for our type of character. But now, +1 to druid skills, 17 strength and some resistances, and here +2 to summoning skills with 15 strength and 9 all res. I mean, I think the game is clearly trying to tell us that we should have been playing a druid. I mean, considering those amulets and the circlet from Imbuing, well, those would have been some serious upgrades, huh? Well, perhaps there is a druid run in store for us someday, but this time with the benefits of using the shared stash and everything we found here, maybe. But anyway, we'll see about that in the future. Now, when it comes to crafting, there's quite a bit to discuss. Crafted items are special in the fact that they have 3 preset stats, and in addition to those, will generate from 1 to 4 affixes. There's a degree of predictability to these items. Besides those fixed stats, the amount of guaranteed affixes rises with their item level. At eye level 71 and higher, we are sure to get all 4 possible affixes. Crafted items are split into 4 groups: blood, caster, hit power, and safety. Those categories determine their profile of static properties and the type of gem needed to create them. All crafts require a perfect gem, a jewel, a lower rune, and the main item, which needs to be magical and of a certain type. For example, in order to create caster gloves, you need to use specifically a pair of leather gloves, demon hide gloves, or bramble mitts. No others will do. There are a few interesting quirks with crafted items. First off, the guaranteed stats don't prohibit affixes granting the same thing from showing up. Those two can stack. For instance, items from the blood category give from 10 to 20 life as one of their fixed properties, but can still generate one of the life-giving affixes, which will simply add its value to that static 10 to 20 life. Secondly, a downside to crafted items is how the required character level is determined on them. Similarly to other cases, the base value for the calculation is whatever affix with the highest character level requirement spawned on the item. However, with crafted items, this value is then increased by 10, plus another 3 for each affix in total. So with all 4 affixes, we have to add 22 to the character level requirement the item would normally have. There are some infamous stats with an extraordinarily high level requirement, like lifesteal on amulets and mana steal on rings, that can launch the total value of it to 95 for amulets and 96 on rings. It's pretty rough, and a reason why you don't necessarily want to go as high as you can with the item level of the craft, in order to avoid some of those problematic affixes. More on that later. Speaking of the item level of the crafted item, we take half our character level and half of the magical items level used in the process. Each of those values is rounded down if needed, and then simply added together. So by virtue of being level 83, we already give the crafted product 41 item levels, and the rest will be determined by whatever magical item is used in the recipe. And that's a great feature. We can easily tailor the final item level of the craft to our needs. Also, to make things clear, the item level of the jewel is completely irrelevant. They can be as trashy and low level as we want, plus the recipe will work with both magical and rare jewels as well. And that's nice, because jewels are the main limiting factor to how much we can craft. All the other ingredients are obtainable in some sort of a decently consistent manner, but for jewels, you just have to play the game and diligently collect them whenever one decides to drop. Alright, now to the specifics of what we're going to make, namely amulets and rings. 3 important reminders here. Crafted items are guaranteed to spawn 4 affixes from item level 71, the affix level of rings and amulets is equal to their item level, and the item level of the crafted item is dependent on both our character's level and the magic item's level. Now, the target eye level ranges we want to aim for are dependent on the affixes we want to have access to and affixes we want to avoid. And normally on amulets you don't really avoid anything because you want to push for that affix level of 90 to have access to +2 class skills. However, for us it's unattainable. Nesharan would have to be much higher level for both the eye level equation in crafting and to gamble some high level amulets. So we're going to employ the strategy commonly used in crafting rings, which is to avoid going too high in order not to spawn the affixes imposing a high character level requirement. The 2 precise item level brackets for our purposes will be 71 to 84 for amulets and 74 to 85 for rings. The minimum is of course 71 to guarantee the 4 affixes, and for amulets that's already enough for the best affixes, like Atlas granting up to 30 strength, or Colossus for 60 life, or Prismatic for 20 all res, and so on. 71 is actually perfect for us, because that excludes both nasty affixes we want to avoid on amulets. The Bone Spirit charges at affix level 72, and the highest lifesteal affix coming at affix level 85. Those 2 affixes are going to set the crafted item's character level requirement to 94 and 95 respectively. When going for optimal amulets with +2 class skills, you of course have to bite the bullet and just hope you avoid those, but since that's not an option for us, we will try to make eye level 71 amulets, or at least not go above level 84. For rings, affix level 74 is needed for the best strength affix, giving up to 20 strength, and everything else useful is already an option at that point. We don't want to go above eye level 85, because at affix level 86 comes the highest mana steal affix that will impose a character level requirement of 96, which is something you generally try to avoid. Alright, in order to make those items the way we want, having in mind 41 eye levels provided by our character, we'll have to select amulets of eye levels from 60 to 87 and rings of eye levels 66 to 89. There are 3 recipes we're interested in: caster amulets, blood amulets, and blood rings. I decided to go for a bit of variety here to give us some options and allow us to make use of different runes in the process. Now, caster amulets are the traditional min-max option for the Sorceress. However, not so much in our specific case, strangely enough. The main draw here is the 5 to 10 FCR, which can then be comboed with the 10 FCR Apprentice Affix for a potential 20 FCR in total. That, coupled with +2 to Sorceress skills and some other good stuff that can show up in amulets, gives this recipe godly potential. For us though, the allure of more FCR doesn't really apply anymore. With our Spirit Monarch, we're guaranteed to reach the next breakpoint of 105, and all the gear giving us FCR like Skin of the Viper Magi, Mage Fists or Spirit Weapon are very unlikely to be replaced, as those are some of our best items, and we have no chance to achieve the final breakpoint of 200. It's just too far away for all but the highest gear levels. So this FCR on the amulet will essentially be a wasted stat for us in our current setup. The other mods like more mana or mana regeneration aren't that important. So here comes the blood amulet. It has one completely useless stat in the form of lifesteal, but the other two have some value. More life is always good, of course, especially with the prospect of having to shift attribute points from vitality to strength, and faster run walk, even though it's not that important for a sorceress and the value is low. Well, we're at 0 right now, so it would make a bit of a difference, being basically unaffected by diminishing returns. So even though it's not the usual option, it offers some potential for us. I also wanted to throw in a ring recipe in there to give us some chances of upgrading our rare ring, which basically gives us only 27 life and 5 all res. There's definitely a decent likelihood of getting something better than that with a blood ring. Again, the lifesteal is wasted, but the recipe also gives life and 1 to 5 strength in this case, both of which we'll gladly accept on an item. With a max roll of the fixed strength and the best strength affix on rings, we're looking at a potential 25 strength from a ring, and if we get a good roll on life combined with the best affix for it, that's 80 life we can get here. So the potential is pretty sweet, but of course it would require extreme amounts of luck. And that's the preface we always have to make, if we get lucky. The fact of life in Diablo 2 is that you generally need a lot of tries to get something really good, but on the other hand, our standards are way lower than what you would normally aim for playing on Battle.net, so the crafted items don't have to be that great to still be an upgrade for us. We're not fishing for some best-in-slot, min-maxed, ultra-sick gear, just something a little better than what we have. But, speaking of the high ceiling of those crafts, you could look up screenshots of various crafted amulets and rings out there, but those will make you cry, so I don't recommend that. Well anyway, let me quickly prepare the crafting session, and I'll be right back.
I'd still like to discuss what components are best used in necromantic potions.
Okay, here's our crafting session ready to go. We've managed to collect 25 jewels up until now, so here's what we can do. We'll have 8 chances for a blood ring, using up all of our soul runes, and we'll spend the rest of our rubies on blood amulets, and then, in respect of tradition, we'll be able to make 9 caster amulets. And we're going in with no expectations, but still harboring a little hope for some bombastic results. Anyway, let's start with the rings. Only a couple of tries, but we're limited by our resources, and I just wanted a few chances to upgrade this ring over here. And of course the blood rings will be crafting, and give us from 1 to 5 strength, from 10 to 20 life, and that lifesteal we don't care about. So let's see what the game can give us here. Quite a few things, but low values all across the board. This is not what we're looking for, of course. Same here, this is basically nothing. Some mana, max roll on strength, a little bit of poison resist. We're going to need something better than that. A rough start to this crafting session. But we have 4 more tries for a decent ring. Alright, 10 strength of course is the result of the 1 to 5 guaranteed strength getting combined with a low strength affix. Come on game, let's get something here. We don't need anything that great for us to be an upgrade. Here of course the required level got elevated to 87 because of that lifesteal affix. 9 in total here, the combination from the guaranteed and the affix. And finally, just trash rings all across the board, but let's not lose hope, because it is the amulets where the true potential lies, of course. So the blood amulets we're going to start out with give us from 5 to 10 faster run walk, from 10 to 20 life. That lifesteal we have no use for, but also, of course, amulets unlock the potential for plus skills. So getting something like +1 to sorceress skills or +2 to fire would be optimal. especially if it's accompanied by something else nice. Oh man, +1 to Necromancer skills, 44 life and 39 lightning res. If that was Sorceress skill levels, I wouldn't complain about this amulet one bit. This would actually be pretty nice for us. Alright, enough of the Necromancer. I get it, game. You want us to be playing a different class. Assassin skills this time. Well, at least getting plus skills every try. But this is definitely not what we're looking for. Just low values everywhere. This is the standard result, it seems, from this crafting session. Game is being pretty pretty uncooperative when it comes to the results. Alright, Paladin. We're going through all the classes. Perhaps we'll eventually arrive on the Sorceress. 4 all res, huh? That is a sick amount. Alright, I guess the imbues were all about the druid, and now the game... You've made your point about the necromancer, okay? Cut it out. Enough of that already. Alright, combat skills for the paladin, and pretty much nothing else. Well, we're going to leave this blood page pretty dissatisfied, but we still have 9 more tries with these caster amulets. And they, of course, give us from 5 to 10 FCR, from 10 to 20 mana, and from 4 to 10% increased mana regen. So let's see how luck is going to treat us here. Oh, that is a very interesting set of properties here. As you can see, the 8 static FCR got combined with that 10 FCR affix, giving us 18 in total. And then we have 4 all res, but with 2 really high rolls of particular resistances coming from cold and poison. Well, this still isn't really what we're looking for. Our Mahimo Curio, when we take a look at that, basically gives us 40 life because it's 10 strength being equivalent to 20 life and 10 vitality, which is directly 20 life for the sorceress, and 10 all resistances. And we're going to be concerned about all of our survivability stats because of course we're going to lose a lot of vitality in the process of our respec, and we're also going to lose a lot of resistances when we switch our ancient pledge over to the Spirit Monarch. We're going to lose resistances all across the board, but especially fire. So this is a concern to get some survivability stats. Of course, it would be really nice to get the sorceress skills. I mean, come on, game. Give us something here, dude. Shapeshifting. I'm not even going to comment about that. I am getting a little mad here. Right, 7 all res, and basically nothing else useful for us. Alright, 4 final tries. Let's go, game. Come on. After all this imbuing and crafting and everything, let's get some results at least. Let's get something, man. 20 strength, +1 to summoning for the druid. I mean... Alright, last try. This better be good, or I'm going to smash something. Jesus Christ. This has to be the worst crafting session I've ever done. Oh man, all of these jewels that we've accumulated over the course of our whole playthrough resulted in this. Here, of course, another interesting note is that level 94, because of that those bone spirit charges. Of course, this is the result of being unfortunate with that property. I mean, that is pretty sad. That is pretty sad that we got absolutely no upgrades from everything that we've attempted here. This amulet, though, I mean, nah, because, like I said, Mahimo Curio basically gives us 40 life and gives us 10 all res. So 40 resistances in total. Here we have 39 to a particular resistance. I mean, it's basically the same result here. I guess we get a little bit more faster run walk and magic damage reduced. Maybe this is something, but I think if we're going to use a particular resistance amulet, it might be Nokazan's relic because of that big fire resistance boost that we have to take into consideration, like I said, because of that Spirit Monarch not giving us any fire res. So anyway, I think I'm just going to double check all of our gear, check out what we can do. We have a couple of pairs of boots with different resistances, so I think I'm going to mix and match all that, see what kind of strength we end up using, and then we'll be ready for our respec and to finally equip that Spirit Monarch. So stay tuned. Alright, after that big heck you middle finger from the game, and a lot of digging through our stash, calculating resistances and tinkering with items and charms, I believe we finally arrived at our ultimate gear setup. I decided to stick with our trusty Mahimo Curio. Made a switch here in the boot spot for these ones that we obtained in our pre-hell preparations, I believe, for that big fire and poison resist boost. And also I dug up this ring that we got earlier for that 15 all res, which is actually the amount we need to have our resistances sorted once we get back to hell and once we switch to our spirit monarch. And basically this change comes at a cost of 27 life. And if we tinkered with some amulets, that would involve a loss of 40 life, and that was my main rationale. And here to explain myself in a little bit more detail, when it comes to this amulet, for example, it is the slightest of upgrades over Mahimo Curio because it gives us, you know, a few more things. But our lightning resist is actually really good, considering we have lore, we have this ring over here, and these two light res charms that in our situation are actually pretty good, and I want to keep using them. I don't want them to get wasted in just lying around in our stash. And basically I also considered some amulets that we gambled, like this one with 16 all res and a poison boost, as well as this one with 19 all res. But poison could be supplemented with this decent poison resist charm, and this ring already gives us enough. So we basically lost 27 life, but we are going to have basically perfect resistances once we get back to hell. We also had this ring lying around in our stash, but this wouldn't make our fire resist up to par. I also ditched this FHR charm. We won't need it anymore, of course. Once we obtain that spirit on our shield, we will actually go up by 1 hit recovery frame, so we don't need this anymore. And just to give us a quick overview of the charms again, as usual, just life and resistances. Some of them are still pretty bad, but what can you do? We have to keep working with what we have. And now we're still on normal, of course, so our resistances are perfect, but everything is going to become clear once we get back to hell and make that switch over to the Spirit Monarch. And now that we have a clear overview of our equipment, we know how many points we have to invest into strength. We have 16 strength coming from gear right now. And even if we get a great item somewhere that would change our attribute situation somehow, we still have that last respec on hell to fall back on if we need to adjust anything. So right now we have 1169 nice life. This is going to drop. We are going to get a little bit more of it once we obtain the Spirit Monarch, because it still does retain that 22 vitality. But anyway, let us proceed with this normal respec. Alright, and now we need to go to 156 strength, and then we will put everything else into vitality. Unfortunately, there's no way to assign like 10 points per click. But we're getting there. Alright, perfect. So now we're at 1009. It is going to increase by a little bit, but of course we knew that this is going to be a loss in the amount of life. Oh, and I wanted to telekinesis there, but of course I don't have my skills bound. We are going to do that in a second. Now I have everything prepared here. Let us also make this Monarch have the 4 open sockets. Oh, by the way, now we have all of our quests super officially grayed out in every act, everywhere. Now that we used this normal socket quest reward that we still had lying around from Larzuk, and of course we did all of those imbues, so finally Tools of the Trade is grayed out. Now we only need to create our spirit on the Monarch. And also, speaking of breakpoints, of course that FCR, we just need 22 to reach that 105 next breakpoint. And of course the spirit has a range of 25 to 35. So regardless of our roll here and how bad it might be, we are still going to reach that breakpoint. And that's why, of course, any additional gear with FCR didn't really change anything for us here. And we actually did get the minimum 25 FCR roll here. We got quite a bit of mana, and as you can see on the shield, the spirit gives 35 resist to cold, lightning and poison, no resist to fire. So this is what we're going to have to work with, but of course the great benefits now, just to make it official, of having this shield is of course +2 to all skills. This is going to again make us better at everything we do by quite a bit. We are going to reach that next FCR breakpoint even with this minimum roll, and of course we are going to improve our FHR by 1 frame compared to what we had. So boom. Alright, 1053 life, so basically a loss of around 100. And now when we return to hell, we can inspect our resistances and we can see that they are all at 75 or 74 here with lightning. So we are perfectly on point. And yeah, once I make the core of our build and am ready to discuss the next part of our respec, I'll be back in just 1 second. Okay, here's our build with a few points still left to spend, which we'll address in a moment. But first, to cover the basics, we now have +6 to all skills with an additional +1 to fire. And in lightning we have our 1-point utilities. Having level 7 static is pretty nice. And then in cold we of course have maxed out frozen orb, and with an 11-point investment we reach the cold mastery soft cap of 17. And then in fire we have maxed out fireball and meteor, with the question of what to do next. And here I wanted to discuss the difference between putting points into fire mastery versus putting them into fire bolt. Fire mastery of course increases our total fire damage, and firebolt synergizes both fireball and meteor. So the general effect of spending more points in both seems to be the same, but the difference lies in proportions. And it's a tricky subject because you can't exactly trust the numbers on the screen. It would appear that each point in firebolt gives a 14% increase to fireball and a 5% boost to meteor, whereas improving fire mastery by 1 would bring a 7% benefit to both spells. It would seem that firebolt has a greater impact in general, and especially so for fireball. However, this isn't so simple, because the flat damage increase from fire mastery is calculated differently from the bonuses coming from synergies. They are both important in the damage calculation, but generally meteor scales better with fire mastery, while for fireball it's a bit more complicated. And it's fireball that you generally try to maximize the damage of, since meteor is already a hard-hitting big bomb and it's a bit more unwieldy to use. It still has its place of course, and many situations lend themselves well to using it, but as your gear improves you usually downscale from using meteor as much in favor of casting more fireballs. And that's because fireball is a general purpose, fast and spammable spell, benefiting from FCR and usable in every situation. And with good equipment, it becomes possible to quickly dispose of most enemies with just a few casts of it. For instance, with high-end gear, doing MF runs on Hel and Dariel involves simply teleporting in her face and ending her with just a few fireballs. We're of course not at that point, but still, fireball is going to be our focus for damage optimization. And in order to achieve the best results, a balance between firebolt and fire mastery is required. And there is a certain sweet spot for the ratio between these two skills. There are skill calculators allowing you to precisely determine it in any situation, but there are 2 easy rules of thumb which explain it from 2 perspectives. This is a little bit different if you only have firebolt in your build, without going for meteor, but if you have both fireball and meteor maxed out, like we do, then the first rule, the first way of looking at it, is to have around 10 less hard points invested into firebolt than the total amount of points we have in fire mastery, and the second approach is to have 10 more hard points invested into both synergies, so meteor and firebolt combined, than the amount of soft points we have in fire mastery. Both of these guidelines end up describing the exact same point situation, just with different elements of the picture being the focus. So, to bring it home to our situation, having in mind that we have +7 skills for the fire tree coming from gear, we can spend the remaining 6 points putting 2 into firebolt and 4 into fire mastery. Now, matching the 2 principles with our numbers, you can see that we have 3 hard points invested into firebolt and 12 total points in fire mastery, basically maintaining that balance. And looking from the other perspective, we have 23 hard points put into synergies for fireball, while again having 12 soft points in fire mastery. Now if you don't exactly adhere to that balance, it's not going to be a big deal, but the difference in that final fireball damage will be more significant if you only put points in one of the 2 skills, like only maxing out firebolt, thinking that each point gives a big benefit to fireball. If you do that, you'll actually end up with worse results. Anyway, now that we're finished with all the preparations, I want to present some damaged screenshots I made earlier, both when we started the video, only having level 77 without maxed out fireball, and at level 83, and before our respec and the switch to spirit. If we compare those, you'll see that our fire spells will be hitting quite a bit harder now, and we'll definitely need that damage going forward. Also, our cold spells will improve a bit, with that +2 boost to Frozen Orb coming from Spirit, and having achieved the soft cap on the Cold Mastery that we didn't exactly have before. So, even though the game made a point in not giving us any additional plus skills, which I am still a bit salty about, we still got upgraded a lot, and with that Spirit Monarch and a few levels, we're now as ready as we can be for the challenges ahead. No pressure. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, even though it was unorthodox again. But now that we've covered the last mechanics and finished up all kinds of outstanding business, it should be straight gameplay until the end. Whatever end that might be. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.